What is happening out there, rotoscouts baseball fans? Welcome to the Friday show. As Larry just said in the chat, no sidetracking today. 14 game slate. We don't want to finish this one up at 9 p.m. I couldn't agree more, Larry. This one we're going to try and get through in a decent at a decent clip. Definitely want to spend some time building lineups today. We've got so much pitching on the board, so many options at the plate that I really want to get to get some hands-on with my lineups and really get focused on it. I think it's going to be a really interesting slate. There's, like I just said, a ton to choose from. There's a lot of teams, several teams carrying higher implied totals than the game at Coors Field. There is a game at Coors Field, of course, with a couple clunker pitchers in it. There's just a lot to talk about on this one. So a lot of good spots for hitting, several premium spots for pitching with big-time name brand arms in pretty decent spots. So it's an interesting board across the slate. We've got a lot to go through and not a ton of time to do it in, but let's say hi to everybody. We got Fanatic in the chat. Kenneth Woodhouse, what's up, buddy? Steven Leibowitz is out there. Joker just came into the room. He's right down here. Matthew Tomlinson's in the chat. Lone Wolf's in the chat. Calvin's out there. We've got Yay saying Waffle House is fire. I agree. I like Waffle House. Haven't been in quite some time, but a lot of those road trips I was referring to the other day ended up at Waffle Houses along the way, or various different types of those rest stop, truck stop type of joints. Love a good greasy spoon truck stop cut type of a restaurant. Larry C's never been to a Piggly Wiggly. Larry, come on, I've been to Piggly Wiggly's. It's a staple down south. Kroger's is in the south. Yep, Joker, go lie down, buddy. Win Dixie's down there. Pojigen Stoner's in the chat. Says, need a Discord channel for 420 enthusiasts. I'm sure there are a few Discord channels for 420 enthusiasts out there. And it's certainly welcome in the Roto Scouts Discord, as you well know. Stephen B's out there saying his usual hello. What is happening, gang? Larry's been to Publix. That's another big-time staple in the South. Publix is more like Florida-based as far as I know, though. I think it's more like Florida, maybe branches up. So that's why a lot of people have been to Publix's, where I think Piggly Wiggly is more like Georgia through like the deep south kind of areas. Could be wrong. Anyway, so within the first 5 minutes of the show, we started talking about supermarkets on a day where we started out by saying, let's not get derailed. Paul, the Discord link should be in the description directly below this video, but I'll grab a fresh one. I did update that the other day, so it should be working, but I'll drop a new one into the chat right now at your request. Dive on in there. Everything is free. Free Discord, free content up on rotoscouts.com. So we've got the home run picks up there, the power index showing you the team by team home run probabilities, the stacks tool, which has both pitcher rankings and projection rankings on it for the hitting. Jake Swales is in the chat. What's up, bud? Benny Levine is in the chat. It says big ups. What's going on, bud? Welcome. Yankees lineup just dropped. Aaron Judge is in the lineup for the Yankees. That is excellent news for the New York Yankees today. Major uptick for their lineup, obviously, and hopefully vaults them back into contention. A lot of ground to make up in the AL East, but only really 8 games back in, despite being in last place. Starting a series against the first place team. It's good shot here. So we've got that's a good one to start off with. Now that we've got it, that is my first game in here. So tell you what, let's just dive on into this one. I was just loading up the Yankees lineup. Let's dive in. Garrett Cole taking the mound against the Orioles in Baltimore. It is hot. It is disgusting. It's like everywhere else around the country. Everywhere seems to be dealing with just extreme heat, some humidity, some nasty-ass conditions. So this one plays up toward hitting, and we're definitely seeing that coming through on the Yankees side of things. A little bit less so on the Orioles side, though they could definitely have a good day. If you get that clunky version of Cole, he has his home run hiccups pop up, you could get the clunky version, but I'm on the Garrett Cole side of this one. He costs 11,000 on both sites. He projects out great, one of the slate leading options. There's like 3 or 4 guys, maybe it stretches out to 5, who are in like this kind of a range on this slate, so it is a very, very deep pitching slate, especially at the high end. But I think Cole is firmly one of those options. One of the best pitchers in baseball over the past few seasons. This year has dipped a little bit in his strikeout rate, 27.6%. A 3.67 xFIP is very good. A 2.78 ERA is obviously excellent for what he's actually allowed for, the way they count runs allowed. A 1.08 WHIP is very good. He's cut his home run rate in half, so the home runs haven't actually been a major issue for him this year. Still giving up 8.3%, barrels 39.3% hard hits, but he's kept it in the park a little little bit better than he has in years past, where he's been over 4% the last 2 years. Just overall, an outstanding pitcher. Yeah, there's a dip in swinging strike rate from 13 and change last year, 14 and change 2 years ago. Yeah, the strikeout rate itself is down by like 4 percentage points from the low 30s the last 2 years. But it's still Garrett Cole. He still has a more than enough ability to pitch through this lineup. Let's say that. And I think he's got the upside to find some strikeouts here. 21.6% for this team for the season. That includes Adam Frazier's 11.5%. I like to single out those hitters. He's got 12 home runs in a weird year for him, but that's not who he is at the plate, right? Kind of a non-threatening hitter. Does put the ball in play, so is a guy who can limit the strikeouts, but it's not a guy who is a major threat at the plate in terms of he also limits strikeouts like a, say, Mookie Betts or a Juan Soto or somebody like that. So there's just different animals in terms of guys with low strikeout rates and what they do. Adley Rutschman at the top of the lineup is kind of one of those guys. 15.8% strikeouts, a great 13.9% walk rate, 14 home runs, a 160 ISO, 22% better than average creating runs, and 431 plate appearances as a catcher. That's phenomenal output for a catcher. It's very good output for a second-year player, and at his prices, I think it's worth buying into for DFS purposes on most slates. Against Garrett Cole, though, my interest in the Orioles is somewhat limited. I'll have some. There's definitely power shining through for the top of the lineup with Gunnar, with Adley Rutschman, with Santander, O'Hearn, and Mountcastle all having decent marks. Mountcastle's really cheap for his talent. $3,900, $2,900 at first base for that player is very cheap. He hits the ball extremely hard. 14.2% barrel rate leads this team. 45.6% hard hit rate. I would not be surprised to see Ryan Mountcastle be the guy that delivers the home run. Although Garrett Cole typically gives it up to weird hitters too. So it might be Frazier. It might be like Ramon Urias at the bottom of the lineup. But overall, it's really the top 5 hitters for the Orioles that are your focus if you're building Orioles stacks. And then you mix and match, you thread in some Frazier. Definitely add some Austin Hayes to the mix. 3,500, 2,800, a good year for him. Was an outstanding season, and he's cooled a little bit over the last 150 or so plate appearances, but still 295, 332, 461, creating runs 18% better than average. And it's not like he's pricey in the outfield. Colton Cowser, premium rookie, hasn't done much of anything yet in 53 plate appearances, but at the time of his call-up, he was like the number 2 prospect in all of baseball. So he's a very high-end rookie outfielder. Ramon Urias does have a little bit of pop, multi-position eligible on both sites, 3 on FanDuel, 2 on DK, 2,300, 2,700. That's a good buy at the bottom of the lineup if you're making a bunch of stacks of Orioles. But they're kind of a low-end, mid-priority stack. I'm going to have more Cole than I have Orioles today. I don't know why I'm like leaning down and out of the frame. It's probably because I'm trying to reach Joker back behind me and keep him quiet with one hand and trying to make sure I actually talk into the microphone so that you guys can hear me. But try and get reoriented in the frame here. Yankees bats, definitely interesting against Grayson Rodriguez. I think there is potential for Rodriguez, specifically because it's the Yankees and they have a tendency to go bust in all types of situations against definitely worse pitchers than this kid. 26.1% strikeout rate for him over 56 innings. They sent him back down at one point. He came back up. 9.9% walks. The issues crop up for him really around the walks and then around all that premium contact. 11.7% barrels is problematic. 50.6% hard hits is extremely problematic. 91.2 miles an hour of exit velo and a 5.14% home run rate. All of this should normalize for him over time. It's still a relatively small sample. A lot of this was just some happenstance in his rookie season. You take that if you're the Orioles all day, given that he's striking out 26.1% of major league hitters, pitching to a 3.80 xFIP under the surface. So I do think there's plenty of upside for Grayson Rodriguez, particularly 6,300 on DraftKings. That's a playable SP2. That's a good enough spot, good enough price. 7,700 on FanDuel in such a deep slate. He projects okay. That's an upper mid-board projection. I just don't know how many shares I get to, but I wouldn't mind having a few. I think there's upside there. At the same time, the Yankees are a pretty high priority stack for me. They're all really cheap, so it's everybody but Judge is really cheap because they've been just totally lousy since Judge has been out. But with Judge back in the lineup, that's a big rising tide effect on all these hitters. We've got Gleyber back in the leadoff spot, which I like better than Jake Bauers, who was projected there earlier in the day. 4,900, 3,000 for Gleyber across sites. Definitely a good buy, particularly on FanDuel. That's a very cheap price for a productive second baseman. 16 home runs, 8 steals, a 112 WRC+. Gets on base at an okay clip. And if he's got Judge behind him, it gives him a little bit more range to focus on getting on base rather than trying to knock everything out of the park and be a major source of power upside for this team. Not that that's what he focuses on in general. He's a more power-focused hitter, but he's cut his strikeout rate down from 22.6 last year with a 6.8% walk rate to 13.9% this year with a 9.2% walk rate. That's not insignificant in terms of improvement with the hit tool, improvement with getting on base and putting the ball in play. So I like the spot there for Glaber. Judge is a monster, obviously. 18.95 comes right back top of the home run board. I made him my home run pick for the day. I expect he'll be a little bit popular, but I didn't care. I just wanted to take him in his return to action. Call me a homer, call me a sucker, whatever. I'll take it. 19 home runs for him in 213 plate appearances, a 383 ISO, a 187 WRC+. It's Aaron Judge. Just plug him right back into lineups. Arguably, a couple hundred cheap, even at 6,000 on DK. Couple hundred cheap maybe at 42, considering that they've been pushing Acuna up to like the high fours lately. So Judge is a superstar. You can roster him all day. Anthony Rizzo, very cheap for his talent. 4,000, 12 home runs for him on the season. He's struggling for what he typically does. He's only hitting 246, 331, 388. 103 WRC+, but just a capable bat hitting third in this lineup behind Judge with Stanton behind him. Stanton 5,000, 3,100, another, say it with me, cheap Yankee. Great bat, 15.5% barrel rate, 50.7% hard hits, 13 home runs. Yeah, he's hitting 200, 278, 442. I don't really care when it comes to Stanton. I'm just looking for the home run upside. I'm looking for that double dong upside. He's got an 11.07 in the home run model. Obviously mashes everything he comes into contact with. DJ, struggling this season, but at least offers cheap multi-position eligibility. 231, 307, 372, though. That is just an ugly DJ LeMahieu season. Just completely dead at the plate the last couple of years after they gave him a contract. Big surprise. Billy McKinney, Harrison Bader, Anthony Volpe, and Ben Rortvedt rounding out the Yankees lineup. I'm going to try and summarize some of these bottom of the lineups and try and get through some of these teams quickly. McKinney, capable part, has been good and still is very, very cheap. Only 97 plate appearances on the season, but does have 5 home runs at 230 ISO. I think you could plug him in as a mix and match play in Yankee stacks for sure. He would be not a high priority, but given his very, very cheap pricing, I think he's a high functioning part in Yankee stacks. Lefty hitter in Yankee Stadium, or excuse me, this is in Baltimore, so forget that part. But a lefty actually plays up better for power in Baltimore as well. So you take the left-handedness, but with a more of a grain of salt than if it was in Yankee Stadium. Harrison Bader is a infrequent contributor, does have decent counting stats. Same story with Anthony Volpe. Ben Rortvedt is here more for defense at the catcher position. It was only 3 home runs 2 years ago and 98 plate appearances in that cup of coffee. So he's more of a defensively oriented catcher, Rortvedt. So this one was enthusiasm about Garrett Cole. A couple of Grayson Rodriguez darts are fine. Enthusiasm about Yankees bats, particularly the top end of the lineup, of course, and then definitely some hedge position Orioles stacks at worst. And you could argue that they're in a okay spot with in a home game against Cole, given their lineup, given low ownership and very low prices for DFS purposes. That plays up a little bit, but I'm strongly on the Cole side of this one. Phillies against the Pirates, another one of my favorite pitchers of the day. Zach Wheeler projects up near the top of the board. Only 9,800 on DK for Wheeler is a great, great price. Really like that spot quite a bit. 10-6 on FanDuel. I expect it's going to keep him into the single-digit type of ownership, even in a matchup against the Pirates. So I just love the spot. I don't think he's going to be all that popular. I think it's going to be a great opportunity for us for DFS, a great opportunity to get a good real-life pitcher in a good real-life situation for DFS purposes, and he's a good, effective DFS pitcher. 27.1% strikeouts in 118 and a third for Wheeler this year. 20 games started, so he pitches fairly deep into games. He chases bonuses. 5.4% barrel rate. He's very good at limiting power. 86.7 miles an hour of exit velo. Only a 2.02% home run rate against a relatively non-threatening team when it comes to power. Yeah, they've got Suwinski, who's got 21 homers this year. Everybody else, Brian Reynolds, McCutchen, G-Man, all the rookies that are in this lineup, I don't really see that as a major threat to a guy like Zach Wheeler. Just given what he does well on the mound. He doesn't give away free passes, only a 4.6% walk rate, 3.88 ERA, 3.47 xFIP, 12.6% swinging strikes this year. Wheeler's very, very good at a good price, probably low owned, against a lousy ball club. They might get better in a hurry with some of these kids down here come around, but all these guys, the leader in that group is Henry Davis with 131 Major League plate appearances. That is not an experienced bunch going up against a very high-end right-handed pitcher. So I like Zach Wheeler's side of this one quite a bit. A couple hedge stacks of the top end of the Pirates would be okay here. If you wanted to go like Suwinski, Reynolds, McCutch, G-Man, or Henry Davis, I'd probably lean Henry Davis. He's been productive in that small sample. 261, 351, 417, a 111 WRC plus. I ignore that G-Man's not coming through the thing again. I guess if they changed his spelling or if I changed it or what, but one way or the other. Oh, it's so not worth it to waste time changing G-Man Choi's name. That stupid dash. So now his pricing goes away, but at least we see his statistics. 6 homers in 67 plate appearances. You're getting a cheap lefty bat there who does have power potential, but he's a part-time platoon-focused kind of a player against a pitcher who does not have home run issues. Very low expectation kind of a play around G-Man, but he is in play in Pirate stacks. Like if you're going out of your way to stack Pirates, I wouldn't skip him all that often in the cleanup role. Andy Rodriguez, definitely a high-end prospect at the catcher spot, but very limited experience. 192, 276, 346 in his first 29 plate appearances. Triolo's only been okay over 92. Nick Gonzalez over 102 has 2 home runs, 79 WRC plus. None of these guys have enough experience to really be fairly talking about in this spot. So if you're going to the top of the Pirates lineup, it's fine. Suwinski's got 21 homers on the season at 279 ISO. Great little breakout year for him, and he's still very cheap, 3,800, 3,200. I mentioned him the other day as a potential source of one-offs, and I think that's true again today. Even with Zealer. We're already falling apart, and it's the second game out of a 14-game slate. Even with Wheeler on the mound and that lack of home runs, there's a little bit of potential for Suwinski in that leadoff spot, given all the plate appearances and the very, very cheap pricing to get one. So my primary guys are Suwinski, Reynolds, McCutchen, and Davis in that lineup. And then like G-Man's a bolt-on, maybe Indy's a bolt-on if you're building on DK. But I greatly prefer the Philly side. I greatly prefer Zach Wheeler. Mitch Keller has been kind of a mess since like the start of June. If you look at his xFIP and his ERA and everything, everything has come down as the season has gone on. He started out great. Shohei Ohtani had cramping, but is in the lineup. Okay, good. Started out great this season and has really cooled off in typical Mitch Keller form. Just he does it in spurts. He does it when we're expecting him to pitch well. He doesn't when we aren't expecting him to pitch well. He does. That's just basically who Mitch Keller is. Overall, it boils down to a 4.01 ERA, a 3.72 xFIP in 21 starts, 128 innings, 25.4% strikeouts. I think he's playable against the Phillies, but I prefer the Phillies bat side of this one. I'm going to lean into the struggles. I'm going to lean into the Mitch Keller of it all. 9.2% barrels, only 32.4% hard hits, and 2.97% home runs in spite of that. I think there's enough potential here for the Phillies. It's not a high priority stack, but they're a good enough team that I would prefer to have Philly stacks than a bunch of shares of Mitch Keller. A couple shares of Mitch is fine, but it's not like the prices are all that low. He projects okay. The 29 FanDuel point projection is fine. It's a high projection on some days, but there's a lot of better options on the mound today. If I'm going to Phillies, it's Kyle Schwarber, Trey Turner, Bryce Harper, Nicky Castellanos, Bryson Stott, JT Realmuto. This is a lineup that you guys know I play basically 1 through 9 on a lot of nights. Jake Cave sliding into the 9 spot today doesn't make it 1 through 9, but 1 through 8 are at least capable. Everybody in that lineup through the middle is producing runs better than average for the season. And then you've got Kyle Schwarber we're just looking for him for power. So I'd rather have him at a positive run creation mark, but I don't really care. The batting average is really low. He's not getting on base like he should be, given a 14.8% walk rate. But I don't really care that much for a premium power bat. For a guy like Trey Turner to be struggling as badly as he is, I care a lot more about Trey Turner's 245, 297, 384, and 82 WRC plus with only a 139 ISO. That's a struggling player. But with everybody else in the lineup producing and with him doing what he does on the field when he has a good day, I definitely want him as part of my plans. He's discounted significantly at $3,100 on FanDuel. Not so much on DK, 57. He's a $6,000 player on DK when things are going right, but he could be a little bit cheaper than that this year. But so many other guys in the lineup help make up for that. Like if you put him together with like Brandon Marsh, who's got a 119 WRC plus, 7 home runs, 6 stolen bases, and does everything right on the field this year for $2,700, that immediately helps offset that price for Trey Turner. It's very easy to build with this team. A lot of capable players at very low prices. Alec Boehm's having a good season. $3,500 first and third base, $2,900 on FanDuel. Real Muto's cheap for his output. 12 homers, 12 stolen bases as a catcher, 358 plate appearances, 4,800, 2,900. I'll play him on FanDuel too. Stott is a capable middle infielder for cheap prices. Castellanos is underpriced for his team-leading output all season. Yeah, it's just a good lineup. Not going to go crazy with Philly stacks, but I definitely want to have a few shares against Keller. Let's keep it moving. Oh, so that one was Zach Wheeler, Phillies bats, Mitch Keller, Pirates bats way down there. Steel Newbert says the Reds lineup dropped, no surprises. I'll grab an update. Let me see if the Angels is out. Should be, given that Ohtani update we just got. There it is. That one. We got the Angels, the Nats. Doesn't look like they've got Philly up here yet, but I'll grab the Nats while I'm here. That's an upcoming game anyway. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, do all those good things for us. If you haven't, join the Discord. We dropped the link into the chat earlier. It's also pinned in the discussion down, or the description for the show below the video window there. Jump in the Discord. It's free. There's always good discussions going on in there. Sometimes it's about baseball. Sometimes it's about all sorts of other things. But I do drop stuff in for alternate slates there from time to time as well. And I'm always happy to answer questions in there when I'm hanging around. I've been wandering away a lot lately, getting my lineups in, finishing the day, and giving it like a big exhale, just because there's so much going into these. So I've been around a little bit less by night in the Discord, but typically I'm around there like all night. If I'm hanging out in the office room here, watching TV in here or whatever, then I'm definitely in there all night, and I'll definitely check it a few times through the evening. But yeah, make sure you're in the Discord because there's a lot of good people in there too. A lot of people who give pretty sharp advice that aren't me. So make sure you're hanging out in there. Join the community. Hit the like button. And let's keep on rolling through this one. The debut of Lucas Giolito for the Angels. 9,600, 9,500. Projects okay. A little bit behind some of the other pitchers we've seen already so far today, but that's a competitive upper middle type projection for a guy who has a lot of upside just in general on what we've seen over the course of time. This year, 25.8% strikeouts, a 3.79 ERA, 4.33 xFIP, giving up a little bit too much premium contact and power. He's pitching a lot like Lucas Giolito from the past couple of seasons. A little bit more premium contact this year than last, but a similar home run rate. Same story with 2 years ago. The strikeouts are down slightly from 2 years ago, but basically in line with last year. The ERA and xFIP, he's Lucas Giolito. He's a very good right-handed pitcher, not a complete ace in a vacuum, but can be a top 2 starter on a staff like the Angels behind Ohtani. So good acquisition for them. I like him to have a decent shot at a good game here against the stout Blue Jays lineup. That Reds lineup just dropped. I'm just grabbing it. It was all the way down the bottom of the board there. Obviously, it's a late game. That's going to be an interesting one when we get there. I think the Dodgers are obvious with their massive run total today, and the probably going to be really chalky. But I actually kind of like the Reds, especially if Miller's getting a little bit of ownership on the mound. Not to spoil the position too much. So 9,600, 9,500 for Giolito is a decent price, even with the Blue Jays on the other side. Whit Merrifield in the leadoff spot, Bo Bichette, Brandon Belt, Vladdy Guerrero, George Springer dropping in the lineup to the 5th spot. Interesting configuration for the Blue Jays. This is actually what I was calling for a couple of weeks ago when I was talking about Whit Merrifield. I was saying it might make sense to slide him and his decent on base, all that speed and that run creation ability up to the top of the lineup rather than keeping him hitting like 5th, 6th, 7th all the time. So I actually think this is a much more sensible version of the Blue Jays lineup. We'll see how long they keep it intact. It might just be for today, but I like this quite a bit. Merrifield in that spot is a great starting point for a stack, 4,100, 3,200, second and outfield eligibility. He's a cheap, easy buy. Good hit tool, good speed, correlates really well now with Bichette, with some Brandon Belt, who's also very cheap and has good power, good run creation upside. 276 plate appearances. He's got 8 home runs from the left side, but a barrel rate of 11.9%, a 41.8% hard hit rate, and all those seasons from several years ago of major home run output. So really like getting to Belt. And even with, it's not even a lack of power. It's 8 home runs in 276 with a 182 ISO. That's good, not great power output. But even with that, 122 WRC plus is dynamite hitting 3rd in this lineup. For that price, that's fantastic. Vladdy Guerrero's cheap, 5,100, 3,700 for his output. 17 home runs, ties for the team lead with Bo Bichette. Then you get this run of 13 home runs, 12 home runs, 13 home runs with Springer, Chapman, Varsho, and Danny Jansen. 13, 13, 12, and 13 for those guys. A lot of power through the heart of the order and into the bottom of the lineup today for the Blue Jays. Kevin Kiermaier, capable enough bolt-on. All these guys are pretty cheap on FanDuel. Fairly cheap on DK as well. Only Vladdy and Bichette, who were both cheap for them, cracking the $5,000 mark on DK. It's a pretty easy to go-to value spot. It's not a great matchup against Giolito, and like I said, I want to have some Giolito on the mound, but he's definitely, as we just looked at, capable of giving up multiple home runs in a game. He is a 1-in-4 strikeout pitcher, but he's not a 30% guy, so there's that. Definitely gives up some runs, gives up some opportunities. So I definitely think, given this version of the Blue Jays lineup, that enhances my interest slightly in a team that I was already going to roster on the other side of Giolito shares anyway. So I like the Jays, like Giolito, obviously like Kevin Gausman. One of the better projections overall on the slate. He's very expensive, 10-8, 10-9, and it looked like, at least according to one of the sites I checked, that he was drawing some popularity on this slate. So against the Angels, I can see it. There's plenty of strikeouts on board for him, 25.4% strikeout rate for this confirmed version of the lineup. Plenty of strikeout upside, and still with no Mike Trout, you're dealing with Shohei Ohtani, the obvious super-duper star with 38 home runs, 12 stolen bases, a 377 ISO as the best pitcher in baseball, or one of the best pitchers in baseball. Just an outstanding, amazing, historic kind of a year from Ohtani. But then the rest of the lineup is like Taylor Ward, who's a roller coaster. Yeah, he hit 2 home runs the other day. He's got 14 on the season, a 107 WRC plus overall, but he's an extreme roller coaster, very up and down on the year. Mickey Moniak is having a good year, over 191 plate appearances. 11 home runs, 335, 366, 615, a 280 ISO. There's no arguing with that production. But that comes on a 34.1% hard hit rate, 30.9% strikeouts, only 3.1% walks. I could see Moniak coming down to earth, quite like some of these other breakout types, like the Jake Bergers, the Brent Rookers of the world. Moniak's a better player probably than that former first overall pick. I don't want to take the shine off of him too much because he has been having a great breakout season. But given some of those metrics, I do expect him to at least come back to earth a little bit over the long term. And then you get like Mike Moustakas, Matt Thaiss, who's got a decent power bat for cheap prices as a lefty catcher. Moose is having an okay season, kind of unexpected to even see him at 264, 336, 447, and above average for run creation with 9 homers in his ledger. First base, third base, 3,000, 2,700. You could do worse, but you could also do a lot better. And it's a reasonable enough target for strikeouts for Kevin Gausman. Hunter Renfroe, Trey Cabbage, Luis Renifo at the bottom of the lineup. It's a targetable team, for sure. If Gausman is crazy popular or even like outpaces like a lot of the other options on the board, I'll probably start pulling back shares and dedicating him just to other pitchers on deck because there's so many guys who project very similarly who aren't facing Shohei Ohtani in the lineup on the other side, who aren't facing some of these home run hitters. So definite interest in Gausman. I believe in that projection wholeheartedly. 3.18 ERA for him on the year, 2.91 xFIP, 5.9% walk rate, 32.9% strikeout rate. He's been dominant. He's been very, very, very good this year. So definitely worth going to. Definitely get some shares. But kind of like what I'll say about Coors Field later, if that gets overly popular, it's a spot I can maybe get away from on a deep slate. Not fully, but like undercut the field kind of get away from on a deep slate. So, yeah, interest in all 4 corners in this one. Ranking it out, it's Gausman. Gausman, Giolito, Blue Jays, bats, Angels, bats. Gausman, Giolito, Blue Jays, bats, Angels, bats. That sounds right. I wonder how I wrote it up in the article. I wrote that so long ago. Hours and hours ago at this point. Let's see. Gausman, Giolito. So I said Kevin Gausman, chalk. Lucas Giolito is a low-owned play with talent. Minor shares of Blue Jays bats and stacks. Minor shares of Angels bats and stacks. It's about how I see it. Maybe I take the minor out of the equation for the Blue Jays side of things. A little bit more interest in them than I had, just given that funky change to the lineup that I like. I think we got everything in this one, gang. Renifo is always a player that I'll throw in, by the way, when I'm stacking Angels. If I'm building, 5-10 Angel stacks, he'll be in a handful of them. I like the bat, decent little sneaky power bat that nobody really plays. Very cheap, multi-position eligible. So he's an interesting hitter at the bottom of their lineup that just jumped out at me. Guardians and White Sox. I kind of like this as a game stack. I'm not one to really go out of my way to make game stacks as like a deliberate thing. But if you are inclined to do that, I kind of think this is a good spot for it. Xavier Curry against Touki Toussaint. Spelling bee of a matchup for sure. It was interesting to write about these two players at the same time, but I don't think I want shares of either of them. I think DraftKings is out of their mind pricing Curry at $9,000. I don't know. That's like, roughly twice as much as he should cost. He hasn't pitched more than 3 innings in the last few months. He's an opener. He pitched 2 days ago. He threw an inning in just pure relief. I don't think we see more than 3 innings from him, and I think 2 innings is probably a realistic expectation for Xavier Curry here. And I think he's completely targetable anyway. It's not like he's going to pitch 3 innings with a 40% strikeout rate. It's not like you're getting Spencer Strider over 2 or 3. He's got a 17% strikeout rate for the year. 4.98 xFIP. He's giving up 92 miles an hour of exit velocity on the average. 45.3% hard hits, 8.2% barrels. I'm throwing White Sox bats at him in the Guardians bullpen. I absolutely think that's a good spot. Benintendi, Timmy, Luis Robert, Eloy Jimenez, Jake Berger, Gavin Sheets, Oscar Colas, Zach Remillard, and Sebi Zavala. Weaker back end with who's missing? Andrew Vaughn is missing, and Jasmani Grandal is missing. Other than those two guys, it's the everyday version of the lineup. There's plenty of sneaky lefty power in the bat of Oscar Colas for 2,200 down at the bottom of the lineup. Sebi Zavala's got a little bit of sneaky pop for cheap catcher play at 2,500, 2,200. I'm talking about 6 home runs in 165 plate appearances and wildly inconsistent. These are the value darts that you bolt on to the top of the lineup, right? Everybody knows that the premium bats are here, and really it's here. These two guys are historically good bats. Benintendi's been okay at 281, 346, 368, but a 98 WRC plus, back below the waterline, only 2 homers, only 12 steals. Anderson, we've talked about a number of times, he's up to a 56 WRC plus. Having to use the word up to shows how bad his season has been. That's 44% below average for run creation. 10 stolen bases that he's had for a while, still 0 home runs. 28 home runs, 13 home runs, 24 home runs. This is what we're targeting as the core of the lineup. And then you can bolt on any of these guys down here or any of these guys up here. But it's really that heart of the lineup with all that power from the right side that we're looking for here. Any one of those guys is a good one-off. Any one of those guys can be played in combination with just the other two in a mini stack. But I like stretching this out to a full stack. I think full stacks are kind of a mandatory thing on a 14-game slate. That just enhances the odds so much that 2 full teams, 2 full stacks are going to deliver when we've got 28 options on the board. On the other side, Guardians going up against Touki Toussaint, 5,100, 6,400. I don't really see any need to go to him. The Guardians are carrying one of the higher implied totals on the board in Vegas. They're at 5.39 earlier in the day. It's probably changed a little bit, but still one of the higher implied totals. Rivals the totals in Coors Field. They're 7-3 over their last handful of games. They're sitting pretty. They're 52-51 on the season. They're a game and a half out of first place in the division. They've been bad, but somehow they're in contention, and they're kind of coming around all collectively at the same time right now. So I do think that I want to be a believer and maybe an early investor in the Guardians turnaround if it's not too late to even call it early. 16 homers on the year for Ramirez, 15 for Naylor, 11 for Josh Bell. That's your power core in the heart of this lineup. Those are the 3 players that are over the run create. Oh, no, excuse me. Steven Kwan is also over the league average for run creation now. Andres Jimenez joins that group in my mind, despite a lack of output overall. 9 homers, 17 stolen bases is okay. Below average for run creation by 6%. But I suspect now that he's hitting second, this is going to come around pretty quickly. And I do believe in the power. I do believe in the stolen base upside into the 2020 kind of a range or a little bit beyond, at least a little bit beyond for the steals. So a believable top end. Josh Bell's underperformed, but he's very, very cheap. It sucks that you have to decide between him and Naylor at first base, but it does at least give you an opportunity to differentiate even within stacks of Guardians while still getting a pretty good bet if you go to Bell shares over Naylor shares in some of your Guardian stacks. Not a spot where you want to do it in all of them because Naylor's been arguably their best player all year. 128 WRC plus for him, 128 for Jose Ramirez. He's out hitting Ramirez at the plate in terms of the triple slash, not necessarily in the power of the steals. Ramirez obviously the better player, but they've both been really good. Will Brennan is okay late in the lineup. Oscar Gonzalez is rejoining the team. He's made 76 plate appearances this year, 1 home run, a .095 ISO, a 38 WRC plus. He had 11 in 382 plate appearances as a rookie last year, 296, 327, 461, 22% better than average grading runs. He was actually a fairly effective player when he was healthy last year. I just talked about Oscar Gonzalez. Bo Naylor, power behind the plate, 4 home runs in 81 plate appearances as a cheap catcher. And then Gabriel Arias, still very cheap, 2,000, 2,200. I talked about him yesterday. A kid that they do expect to hit for just like one of those wildly inconsistent power bats, probably a 30+% strikeout guy. He's got like a 30 grade hit tool, but like 70 grade raw power. So there is hope for Gabriel Arias to hit for some power at the plate. We definitely can take some shares of him at the bottom of the lineup here. It's not a great option. But I think he is a playable part at the bottom of the lineup, especially given the dead minimum pricing. Shortstop and outfield eligibility is also a valuable combination. And then you get him at first, third, or short for 2,200 on FanDuel. That's a playable enough part going up against this pitching matchup. So it's really kind of top to bottom on both of these lineups. I think I want to have a decent amount of shares of both of these teams. I think I probably will end up with some game stacks. Again, I'm not going to go out of my way to build game stacks, although that is in my placeholder. Just because I realized it while I was writing about this team fairly early on in the day. And I was like, oh, let me put that in. And then I'll have a game stack because I'm going to end up talking about it. And then I'll be able to put my placeholders in. So I did that. But I don't know how much I'll say, I specifically need the game stack. But I wouldn't be surprised if it just comes together naturally in a lot of lineups. These guys aren't expensive. They'll lead directly to the high-end pitching options. You can put together a very good full stack on the FanDuel slate, and I suspect also on DK, given some of these prices. Full stack with these two teams, and then go to a $10,000 pitcher. So pretty easy to build with both of these squads. Damn it. I forgot to do call it a draw, honestly. It's neither pitcher, and it's both stacks. Call it a draw. I like both spots. If I had to lean into one, I would say probably Cleveland, just given where Vegas has them in run expectation. But with that in mind, I actually like the hitters in the White Sox lineup a little bit better, just on name brand, type of a take. Nationals with Matt Gore on the mound going up against Max Scherzer on the mound for the Mets. Mackenzie Gore, 101 innings, 20 starts, 28% strikeout rate. But a lot of flaws in a 9.9% walk rate, an 11.2% barrel rate, 90.2 miles an hour of exit velo, 45.7% hard hits, a 3.68 home run rate. Started out the season really well. Was pitching at over a 30% strikeout rate for a little while, but it's really cool, really come back to earth in a realistic way, but can give us a little bit of upside. Had a decent game in his last outing. 7,300, 8,900 is an effectively discounted price, especially on DK, where you're using him as an SP2 and you don't have to pin the hopes of the entire lineup on him. I actually kind of like the spot for Mackenzie Gore. He projects out okay. I think there's enough strikeout potential here for him. I think he's got enough talent to keep this Mets lineup down. It's not like they're crashing through the top of the model in projections in home run upside. They're very cheap. They're easy to get to. And I do think the Mets are worth stacking given the struggles that Gore has had, given the presence of a Pete Alonso in the heart of the lineup, a Tommy Pham who's performing really well from the right side of the plate. There's plenty of potential for the Mets. They're call it probably mid-range priority stack for me. They ranked out fairly low. 17th out of 28 teams in terms of the projection ranking, 14th by value, 19th by home run upside. So it's like a mid-range stack, and that's kind of how I feel about the pitcher on the other side. So mid-range opportunities for both the Mets stack and Mackenzie Gore. If I'm going to Mets, obviously Nimmo is easy off the top, 4,300, 3,400. It's just too cheap for the productive bat that you get there. A little bit of individual power, great correlation skills. Really like the bat with Brandon Nimmo. Francisco Lindor, you're just booking counting stats. 19 homers, 17 stolen bases. Thank them and move on for the discount. Pete Alonso also discounted. 4,900 is way too cheap for Pete Alonso on DK. 39 is a little bit cheap for him on FanDuel. 28 home runs on the season at 280 ISO. I don't care about the rest of the statistics really for Pete Alonso. And I know that he just went through a downturn because of the injury, and he'll come roaring back to life. So I'm not worried about Pete Alonso. I'm happy to book shares of him, particularly if he goes a little under-owned because of the struggles, because he's very cheap. Pham having a good year, 3,300, 2,800. Jeff McNeil, slap hitter, having a bad year given a lack of BABIP for Jeff McNeil. If the ball's not falling in, he is not good at the plate. 249 .074 ISO for him, 327 on base percentage, 89 WRC plus. He's been bad, but he is a playable enough part for cheap pricing when he's hitting in the heart of the lineup. So you can book shares of Jeff McNeil, but he's a low priority bat for me. I would prioritize Mark Canha more. I would prioritize Mark Vientos more. Brett Beatty, and most definitely Francisco Alvarez, even though he's hitting ninth today. Just book all that power. 19 home runs on the season, a 262 ISO as a cheap catcher bat. Any one of those guys is better than Jeff McNeil. Kana is a cheap playable part as a veteran utility man, 6 home runs, 7 stolen bases, a 105 WRC plus. Vientos we talked about a number of times, premium power bat as a prospect. Only 1 home run, only 64 plate appearances, but in that tiny sample, 12.2% barrels, 53.7% hard hits. I will definitely grab some shares of Mark Vientos in my stacks of Mets. Sucks on DK that you got to decide between him and Pete Alonso. Don't need to make that decision on FanDuel with Vientos slotting in at third base. Beatty, capable part, decent hard hit rate, but hasn't done a ton in 278 plate appearances. He's okay. Mix and match part. Scherzer, major upside. 9,400, 10.8 across sites, 40.7 in my FanDuel projections. One of the top 2 or 3 options. Call it a top 3 option on the slate. Going up against the Nats, yeah, he struggled. Yeah, his strikeout rates are a little bit down. The earned run marks are up. The home run rate is definitely a concern at 5.29%, 10.3% barrels allowed. But it's Max Scherzer going up against the Nats. I am not that concerned, and we've seen Max kind of round into form, I think, a little bit over the last few starts. Let me pull up the game log just to look at some of those recent performances from Max. But I feel like we've succeeded more than we failed when we've said, hey, this is Max Scherzer going up against the team. The last outing was a tragedy. That's right. Gave up 4 home runs to Boston. I forgot about that one. That one sucked. But the game before that, 7 innings against the Dodgers, struck out 6, walked 3. A 1-hitter, shut them out over 7 innings, faced 24 hitters. Was pitching okay before that, 5 runs, 4 runs. The stretch of good starts, I guess I was thinking of, was a little bit before that. And he's given up plenty of home runs this year. It's flawed, but there's plenty of path to success. Let's say it like that, all right? A lot of tough matchups in Max's game log this year, too. But he's definitely not pitching like the Max Scherzer of old. But he doesn't need to for 9,400. 10.8 is high on FanDuel, but he projects well enough against this Nationals team that's not facing a lefty today, so they're not on their productive side of splits. I'm happy to side with Max Scherzer here. I hope he goes under-owned by the public because of the struggles. I will continue to take those shots. If you're going to Nats, it's C.J. Abrams off the top. 3,900, 2,900, 10 home runs, 21 stolen bases. Nice little turnaround for him since he's landed in the leadoff spot, too. He's been very, very productive in that role. Lane Thomas is good against either hand, better against lefties, but he's been very productive overall for the course of the season. 120 WRC plus, 16 homers, 12 steals. Candelario is cheap, 4,100, 3,000 at third base. Tied for the team lead with 16 home runs, a 226 ISO to lead the team, 17% better than average creating runs. Playable part as a third baseman. Keibert Ruiz sliding up to the cleanup role, 4,000, 2,700. I like the power at catcher. Very cheap pricing. He'll be very low owned, but it's just a terrible matchup. And then you get into the bottom of the lineup that runs Dickerson, Luis Garcia, Ildemaro Vargas, Dominic Smith, Alex Cole. It's a very weak bottom end. It is very unlikely to turn the lineup over against Max Scherzer and get it back to the playable parts up here. Very unlikely contributors down here. I really don't like this lineup today. I'm going to strongly side with Max Scherzer. I'm going to take Max shares. He's at the top. Then Mets. Then a few Mackenzie Gore value darts. No real interest in the Nats. If you want to throw some value darts with the Nats, it's okay. Obviously, Max has struggled through a lot of the season, but so have they, and they're not very good, and he is very good. So I'm going to side with Max in that one. Let's see what's going on in the chat. Sure, people have some takes. Steven Leibowitz says, Grayson Rodriguez, I'm there with him. Yeah, I don't hate it. I don't hate the spot for Rodriguez. Projects well enough at a cheap price that I think there's potential there. But it's just, it's terrible hitting conditions. Judge coming back into the lineup is obviously a major boon to the Yankees lineup. So it's not great, but I think the prices are low enough that you can get away with it. Trey saying, I saw an article saying either Scherzer or Verlander is gone. Yeah, I think that is a interesting scenario for the Mets now that they've decided to start selling. They traded David Robertson last night. So I think those guys are both on the block, and they'll see what they can get for him. Fanatic says, I don't think Terry even looked at the weather. I did actually look at the weather today, but I forgot to check the update, and I was not thinking about it as I was plowing through some of those games. So let's circle back. There are certainly storms in the Baltimore area. There are storms in the Pittsburgh area for the Philly-Pittsburgh game. That one, it seems like it's gone a little bit south, actually, which sucks because I love that Zach Wheeler spot. The other ones on the board I wasn't as concerned about. The Mets, it's hot and nasty and disgusting here, and they might get like a pop-up storm, but it doesn't seem like it's going to be anything that's going to like threaten the game from playing. And that's the same story through the Midwest games, through Atlanta and the South. So it's really that Baltimore game looks a little ugly, but I think it plays. And then that Pirates game, the Phillies-Pirates game, is the one that looks a little bit more concerning. Roth's take is that the timing is like right during game time of when the storm's supposed to pop up there. So, yeah, give that another look before we get to lock for sure. Keep an eye on the weather in Pittsburgh. Keep an eye on the weather in Baltimore. I think everything else is okay. Still don't think Judge helps much today. First game back without seeing game pitching after a long layoff is not helpful. It's still Aaron Judge. I'm not worried about it. Maybe he does. I mean, he could go 0 for 5 in any given day. Quite a bit easier than you could say he'll come out and hit a home run or hit a game-winning double or something like that. But we're talking about one of the premier bats in the entire sport. So I'm not gonna just ding him because it's his first game back and maybe his timing will be off. Maybe it will, and we see that quite a bit. It's a legitimate concern, but I also don't know how to quantify that or what do I want to take away from Aaron Judge and the Yankees in what looks like a playable spot for bats to account for that, right? So that's kind of how I look at that one. So let's talk this one. Yonny Chirinos making his debut for the Braves. They claimed him on waivers. I don't really see a need to play Yonny Chirinos here. Should be a traditional start. Probably get like 4 or 5 innings. He's a hybrid relief slash long relief slash opener slash traditional starter, just depending on what day it is. 11.8% strikeouts, though. I think that's avoidable. 9.2% barrels allowed, 91.4 miles an hour of exit velo, a 3.82% home run rate. Going up against a Brewers lineup that I don't really like. They're fairly low scoring. They've got like 2.5 good hitters in it. So that doesn't lead me too much to the Brewers. I can realistically see them being a viable value play because everybody in this lineup is pretty cheap, but they're a very limited squad overall. Christian Yelich is very, very good in the leadoff role. I like him a lot. I would maybe use some shares of Christian Yelich as a one-off across sites, 5,400, 3,700. You're getting a very good player for fairly cheap prices there against a pretty limited pitcher. So I don't mind the Yelich spot as a one-off. I don't mind it in stacks. I would prioritize him in stacks of Brewers. But then you're immediately getting into their catcher is their two-hitter. He's 4,800, 3,000. He's a 269, 347, 432 hitter, 162 ISO, 13% better than an average creating runs, 10 home runs. That's capable for a catcher, but you'd rather have your catcher providing those numbers as a 7 hitter, not your 2 hitter. Willy Adames, very flawed player, 206, 291, 398, does have 17 home runs on the season, strikes out 26.3% of the time, walks in 10% of his plate appearances, 13.5% barrels, but only a 33.9% hard hit rate. Just a weird combination of statistics and a wildly unreliable player. Sal Frelick, they expect to hit. They expect to provide a decent amount of offense. 18 plate appearances. He's been really good, but he's probably going to be the most popular hitter in that lineup at 3,400, 2,900. Hitting cleanup today. 221 WRC plus in the 18 plate appearances. If you're rostering Brewers, you include him, but I think he's going to be popular in those stacks. Monasterio's been okay, over 111 plate appearances. Triple position eligibility on FanDuel for 2,600 is nice. Perkins low end, Miller low end, Turang low end. Weimer at least provides some counting stats from time to time. 12 home runs, 11 steals. The other guys can all run, but nobody's really doing all that much at the bottom of the lineup. So really, like I said, it's like 2.5 real players here. Like through those guys. Just because Frelick's still developing, Adames is really flawed. Yelich is a star, and then Contreras is what he is. So I don't love going to the Brewers. The Braves are a priority. Their home run marks are cut down a little bit as compared to who they are, But overall for the slate, they still look fairly good. And just like some of these are just in a vacuum decent numbers. But like typically we'll see Olsen higher than the magic number, Acuna higher than the magic number. That's because Hauser historically has been good at keeping the ball in the yard. A little bit less so this season in his 11 starts. He's up to a 2.53% home run rate on 6.8% barrels, 43.7% hard hits. Last year, that was 1.76% home runs on 5.6% barrels. Year before was 5% barrels, 2% home runs. So he's got a knack for keeping the ball in the yard, despite not really being an extreme launch angle guy. It's 10 degrees, 9 degrees. This year was really good for limiting launch. But more of a ground ball oriented pitcher, more a guy who is going to focus on keeping the ball in the yard to varying degrees of success. But he's not a premium strikeout guy. He's going to pitch to contact. He's going to be pitching against the Braves and their outrageously talented lineup. He walks 7.6% to go with the 17.7% strikeout rate. Not a premium arm by any means. I don't really need any shares of Adrian Hauser against the best team in baseball for 5,500, 6,600. I think there's better value darts to throw. I really do. Everyday version of the Braves lineup is in place. We just roster this team up and down. Wherever you can afford them, whatever combinations you can afford them in, I do think they're worth going to. 66-46 for Acuna is obviously a premium, but he's well worth it on basically any given slate. 23 homers, 48 stolen bases, a 161 WRC+. Albies, Riley, Olsen, Murphy, tons and tons of power. Excellent run creation ability. Decent hit tools for all of those guys. Marcelo Zuna and Eddie Rosario rounded back into form this year with 18 home runs and 15 home runs respectively. Floating around league average for run creation. Rosario at league average. Ozuna slipped below league average to 93. But we're just looking for power from those two guys realistically. 13.8% barrels and 10.5% barrels for the two of them. They're both very cheap on both sites. They're both totally worth getting to. You can one-off both of those guys in a variety of positions for power. And you can certainly go to stacks of them in conjunction with the top of the lineup. You can even stack the bottom of the lineup on its own with Orlando Arcia and Michael Harris down there. It's just a hyper-productive team. Maybe it's a spot where you don't get overly carried away, but I don't think they're going to be really popular here. And I can target Hauser's run creation as much as he might limit a little bit their home run potential. But if anybody's going to hit home runs against a guy who's okay at limiting home runs, it's probably these Braves. So definitely interested in the Braves. Minor interest in the Brewers stack. No interest in either one of these pitchers. Handful of games to go. Shannon Lambert dropping bombs today. What's Shannon saying? Bigger bonus for the Cards is the weather. I like that. St. Louis historical weather plus Park says it's second to the last on the slate, but seems weird because it's the hottest. Yeah, I like the weather situation in St. Louis. I like that spot for offense today. Looked like Vegas did as well, if I'm remembering correctly. We'll get there. Is that what we're on now? No, we're on the Twins and the Royals now. Definitely upside for Sonny Gray going up against the Royals, and then the Twins were blasting through the top of the implied team totals the last I saw. We have some potential for weather in this one, but as I was saying before, it looks more like it's just a hot, nasty Midwest type of a day. The winds are blowing out. It seems like a major spot for hitting. So Sonny Gray probably not safe, but definitely projects pretty well for a fair price against this Royals lineup and all these strikeouts. It's the lower end strikeout version of the lineup with a 23.9 rather than that inflated like 26, 27% we've been chasing. Some of that is Freddie Fermin with a 20.8%. Some of that is Nicky Lopez with a 16.4. Bobby Witt is down to 19.9. Michael Garcia is at 21.3. A lot of their key bats are still fairly aggressive for strikeouts, though. Sonny Gray is adept at finding strikeouts, 23.4 this season, a 3.15 ERA, a 3.81 xFIP, has only allowed a 0.64% home run rate on 6.3% barrels, despite some hard hits, keeping the ball down effectively with an 8.8 degree launch angle. 111 starts in 111 innings and 20 starts gives you reliable depth. Good chance to chase the bonuses on both sites. Good chance to rack up a healthy strikeout total. I can't imagine he's going to be all that popular on this slate, especially with some good hitting conditions out there. So I like the spot for Sonny Gray. I won't get too carried away with it just because it's not entirely safe. Not that I'm looking for, a guarantee of safety by any means when I talk about these pitchers, but I think there's enough spots that register in my brain as a little bit more safe, register in the model as a little bit more safe, that maybe I temper expectations, temper shares around Sonny, but I definitely want to have a little chunk of them and probably ahead of the field. Brady Singer on the other side, not so much. I do see upside there. I do see there's talent there for sure. He was a fairly effective young pitcher, over 153 and a third last year and 128 and a third the year before. And he, instead of taking a step forward, kind of cratered this year. 5.55 ERA, a much better 4.36 xFIP, but that's a run higher than he posted last year. The strikeouts are way down from 24.2% last year to 18.8% this year. Barrels are around where they were. Hard hits are up about 10 percentage points at an unsustainable 50.9%. I just think we can target this version of Singer for some runs, for some power. It's the Twins, so I'm kind of tempering expectations there as well. They're obviously an aggressive strikeout team. Singer could have a good game here. He's not off the board. He's a value dart. He's not a priority play by any means. I question his viability on the FanDuel slate. At 6,400, he's a value dart for sure on the DK slate, though. 26.8% strikeout rate across the projected Twins lineup. We know they're lousy for strikeouts, but we also know that there's some power upside there. So I think it's a both-sided situation there if you're going to the value darts on Singer. If you're not rostering that much Singer, you can take or leave the Twins. They've got one of the higher implied totals on the board, but they definitely might put some zeros into some people's lineups with all the strikeouts if Singer does have an okay game. If I'm going to Twins, it's Carlos Correa, Edward Julian, who's been fantastic over the last month and a half of the season. Alex Kirilloff is viable, but kind of lower end than some of these other guys. I don't know that the power is as significant for Kirilloff as it is for, say, a Max Kepler for similar pricing, cheaper on FanDuel. I prefer Kepler between those two. 14 home runs for him in 280 plate appearances. Kirilloff's maybe the better hit tool, but I'm looking for home run upside from these guys. Byron Buxton, bad season overall for Buxton. 17 home runs, but below the Mendoza line overall. 223 ISO is fine, but only a 91 WRC plus. Not great. 13.7% barrels. You can still chase some power there. If Jorge Polanco's back in the lineup, that's an uptick for them. Very good hitter as a middle infielder. Second base eligible on both sites. 4,400, 3,000. Easy to click on Jorge Polanco if he's back in the lineup. Matt Wallner's been a stud over his 62 plate appearances. 4 home runs, a stolen base, a 177 WRC plus. Fairly highly regarded prospect, still only cost 2,100, 2,700. I think you can go to shares of Matt Wallner. Vasquez and Michael A at the bottom of the lineup. Definitely can mix and match those guys in. All 12 of Michael A's home runs have been very low on this year, all 11 of his stolen bases, but he's not a consistent player, not a consistent producer. That's why he costs the dead minimum on DK and is never popular. So some interest in Twins for sure. A lot of interest in Sonny Gray for sure. Not a ton of interest in Singer on FanDuel, but yes to Singer dart throws for value on DK. And then if I'm stacking Royals against Sonny, it's maybe some Michael Garcia, given his hit tool ability, some stolen base upside. Definitely some Bobby Witt, MJ Melendez, Sal Perez. This is where the power is. But they're all inconsistent run creators. Freddie Fermin as a secondary catcher if you wanted to mix and match a lot of Royal stacks, but I don't see it as a spot where we want to go to a lot of these stacks. So really for me, it's like 1 through 4, and then maybe like Michael Massey from the left side just because he's very cheap at second base and has 7 home runs in 259 opportunities. Not been great overall, though. No Nick Pratto in the lineup for them, so that takes a lefty power bat out of the equation. It's ugly for Kansas City. So Sonny Gray, Twins bats, Brady Singer darts, and then way down would be the Royals. Rays and the Astros. We probably got lineups in this one, but no, we don't. Surprise. We'll grab the other ones when we get there. All right, Shane McClanahan against Christian Javier. McClanahan's struggling lately after a really hot start to the season, and Javier's been kind of struggling all season. It's a tough spot to call. I'm just going to follow the model in this one. I think Javier's playable at 8,600, 9,000 despite facing the Rays. They've come down a little bit overall in terms of their outrageous production to start the year. A lot of these guys' counting stats look similar to where they were about a month ago. Still very good production overall, but have cooled a little bit. And I think Javier's got the talent to pitch through this team. Not that he's been doing it with regularity this year. A 4.32 ERA, a 5.04 xFIP, only 22.2% strikeouts. That's from a guy who was a 33.2% strikeout pitcher last year, 30.7 in a hybrid role the year before. So that's a big dip in quality. He's pitching to a 4.32 ERA and a 5.04 xFIP. He's giving up a decent amount of premium contact and power. I think it's a both-sided situation for Rays bats against Javier, but I think he's cheap enough and projects okay enough. Not a great projection, not even what I'd call a good projection, given the depth of slate. But just given who we know this pitcher is on the right day, I do think there's a little bit of ceiling here. Not one to get carried away with. McClanahan, I know a little bit less of what to make of the current bumps in the road that he's had. 9,900, 10-4 is a little bit pricey for what might be a fairly short start. I expect, upside to 5-6 innings, but he's been a little bit more limited on the mound lately. Excuse me. 2.89 ERA, a 3.86 xFIP on the year, 15.7% swinging strikes is phenomenal. 31.3% CSW is very, very good. 26.1% strikeout rate is pretty damn good. He's one of the more talented pitchers on the slate. Lefty going up against the Astros. I see significant upside. Like I said, I'm going to believe the projection, especially at 99 on FanDuel. I'm just going to kind of ride with it, but I might not let it get carried away where it would normally probably come up like crazy when I sort my lineups. I might put my finger on the scale at that point. I'll let it run through the optimizers normally, but then we'll see how it rates out in terms of where I'm getting these guys as they stack up against one another. And I expect given that cheap price on FanDuel, I would get naturally to a lot of McClanahan. 10-4 on DK. It's a high price, but I think it's worth paying at least in a few shares. Astros projected lineup has both Altuve and Jordan Alvarez in it. They both came back, what was that, yesterday? Day before? Probably the day before. Kyle Tucker and Alvarez, no ding to them against most lefties. When you're facing a premium, massive upside lefty, there's maybe a little bit more thought to a bit of a downgrade against those guys, but they're both very successful for their careers against left-handed pitching. So I don't really sweat either one of those guys. And if somebody's going to do that, I'd rather let the public do that in their shares of Astros, and I'll just take advantage of the low-owned spot for when I go to Astros. They're not a priority stack for me, though. They project into, let's see, they are 18th ranked on the board with some high prices kind of cutting into their value numbers. 12th ranked for home run potential, given the home run upside of Kyle Tucker, of Jordan Alvarez, of Chas McCormick in this lineup. A little bit less so for Alex Bregman and Jose Altuve, but major home run upside for both of those guys as well. They're decent play for power in a bad spot overall. So, limited interest in the Astros. But it's Altuve, Tucker, Bregman, Alvarez, probably Chas McCormick down the lineup. Mix and match Pena across a lot of shares of Astros. Mix and match Abreu. These guys are okay as minor filler at the bottom of the lineup. But I think it's a playable part of the slate against McClanahan. I prefer the McClanahan side, though. So, McClanahan, tough call between the bats. How did I write it in the article? Let me scroll down. Give you exactly how I put it in the article. McClanahan, Rays stacks, Astro stacks in small doses, and Christian Javier is a mix-in. I think that sounds about right. Which 3 hours ago Wisniewski was supposed to start for Iowa, is no longer with the team in Memphis, so maybe he's the one tonight. Yeah, I had Smiley in that spot. Yeah, Smiley through FC and Stochastic, who ultimately both sourced their information from just either labs as far as stuff like that goes, or one of the other primary informational sources. Those guys aren't calling teams and finding out on their own. Oh, per underdog, Wisniewski is getting the start. All right. That will require a change when we get there. Let me just look. Yeah, they updated it on over on Schmabs as well. That's coming right up. So why is this? Goddamn mouse. All right. Bear with me one sec. Let me pull Wisniewski here so I can update this real quick. Small enough I can just use his actual output for the career. God damn it. I hate when you copy something that's a bunch of columns and then it just all pastes into one column on Excel like that. There we go. All right. Taken care of. Perfect. All right, so where were we here? So this one was I read it off in the order that I prefer it. So it was what did I say? McClanahan, Rays bats, Astros bats, and then Aviator as a mix-in. Definitely believe in that. If I'm going to Rays, I really like the spot for Brandon Lau off the top of the lineup. 4,100, 2,900. He's just super cheap for his power upside. 11 home runs and 261 plate appearances. Was the league leading shortstop, or second baseman rather, with 39 home runs 2 years ago in his last fully healthy season. When he's healthy, Lau is a major source of power at second base. So I love the price on him. Wander Franco, Randy Rosarena are stars for 5,700, 5,500, 3,500, 3,600 respectively. Home run power, stolen base upside for those two guys. Luke Raley's been really good this season, 15 and 11, a 154 WRC plus in 281 opportunities. First base and outfield eligible for the lefty slugger. Isaac Paredes has been outrageously good this year. Triple position eligibility for just 3,000 on FanDuel is dynamite. 3,800 at third base on DK. The positioning could be better for Paredes, but you'll take him. 18 home runs is great. 235 ISO and only 341 plate appearances. Harold Ramirez, professional hitter, more of a line drive type guy, but does have 9 home runs on the season this year. Josh Lowe, 13 home runs, 22 steals, 22% better than average creating runs. Jose Siri hiding down the bottom of the lineup with a 15.3% barrel rate and 20 home runs with a 309 ISO in 242 plate appearances. Bonkers. Christian Bethancourt, playable catcher piece if he's in the lineup. Let's move on to Hayden Wesneski taking on the Cards. Do we have lineups here too? We do. We have the Cards anyway. So that really doesn't, I don't think, change my outlook in terms of St. Louis here. I was going to go to St. Louis bats against Drew Smyly. I think I'm going to go to him against Hayden Wesneski here. For the season, 10 starts, 60 and 2/3, 19.3% strikeouts, a 4.43 xFIP, a 4.75 ERA. And oh, by the way, look at all this premium contact and home run power. I think we can roster some guys like Nolan Gorman from the left side, Lars Nootbaar in the leadoff spot instead of Brendan Donovan. I like that quite a bit. Nootbaar's a good little source of mid-range power, some steals, great on base percentage to correlate with these guys with all the power bats. Really like this configuration of the lineup. So enthusiasm about the Cards lineup here. Probably not going to get to any Wesneski. 7,100 on both sites, 17-point FanDuel projection. Not really a lot to hang our hat on here right now with this kid. 25% strikeouts in 33 innings last year, and is a kid that I remember when I was talking about him earlier in the year, I was talking about believing in some of the minor league numbers. 25-ish, 26-ish percent strikeout rate through AAA in 2022. So like a mid-range type of a prospect, a second to third prospect type guy. Looks like coming into the season. Ranked 6th per the Graphs prospect report in the organization. Overall, 120th. I don't think it's in play at these prices. If he was at the 5,500, 6,000 range on DK, maybe he's on that SP2 board. There's just a lot of really cheap pitcher options today on for SP2 options on DK. So I don't really see the need to go to any shares of Wesneski here, especially moving him around the board. Didn't know he was going to be starting against the St. Louis Cardinals today. Thought he was going to be pitching in Iowa in the minor leagues. There is an unquantifiable jumbling of the head for a young pitcher. I think in that situation, all of a sudden you're pitching against Paul Goldschmidt and Nolan Arenado in the middle of St. Louis on a ridiculously hot day with the wind in play and all of that. So not a spot I think I want to go to Hayden Wesneski here. At the same time, all those things could be an argument against Jordan Montgomery in terms of the conditions in the park, but I like Montgomery a little bit. 8,100 on DK, value enough in that price. 9,400 on FanDuel, 29-point projection. He projects out okay. He's in that third tier, top of the third tier type of a guy in terms of today's pitchers. 21.7% strikeouts, 3.37 ERA, 3.95 xFIP, 115 innings and only 20 starts. Typically gives you reliable depth. I don't know that he's a priority by any means. He's a little bit more expensive than I want to pay for him on the FanDuel slate. At DK pricing, he's okay. You can mix him in as a pricier SP2 over there. But the Cubbies are good enough that you don't necessarily want to throw too many shares of Montgomery at them. They're good at getting on bases. We've looked at a bunch of times recently. They've got Patrick Wisdom in the projected version of the lineup, so you're adding his power bat to the bottom of the lineup. Heavily right-handed team in this configuration. Nico Horner in the top spot in the lineup with speed, with a decent amount of correlated scoring ability, leading into Seiya Suzuki, Ian Happ, Cody Bellinger, Dansby Swanson, and Chris Morel. That's a great little run of power hitting guys from the right side of the plate or switch hitters, with Cody Bellinger sitting in there in the middle as the lefty as the best hitter in this lineup. 317, 364, 546 for Bellinger, a 142 WRC plus, 15 homers, 12 steals. So I think you're stacking the Cubbies a little bit. You can grab some shares of Montgomery. You can grab some shares of the Cubbies, both as like mid-range type options. Neither side looks incredibly appealing, but both sides are in play. I could see either side of that equation succeeding. Definitely more enthusiasm about the Cardinals bats, though. Like I said, Nootbaar, Goldschmidt, Nolan Gorman. Don't sleep on Nolan Gorman. Hitting third, 22 home runs on the season, a 256 ISO, 4,300, 3,600 against a kid who is right now like stuck between being a minor league pitcher and a major league pitcher. Certainly not proven. Plenty of contact available. Plenty of premium contact probably available. Don't sleep on Nolan Gorman at cheap pricing. Tyler O'Neill, another bat not to sleep on late in the lineup. 3,500, 2,500 in the outfield. Major power potential from O'Neill. 34 home runs 2 years ago. Has been in and out of the lineup, injured with stupid injuries over the last 2 seasons, but a major source of power. Jordan Walker's really good down the bottom of the lineup. Paul DeJong is good. 13 home runs and 297 plate appearances for him. You definitely roster the Cards. Pretty much 1 through 9. Even Neisner is a reasonable enough bat. 8 home runs and 133 plate appearances as a cheap, unowned catcher. It's playable enough. Focus is up at the top here, but definitely playable 1 through 9. This team focuses more like through the heart of the order. I'll grab some Pat Wisdom shares. 17 homers for him, 245 plate appearances, a 282 ISO. Another guy that I just ignore the 192 batting average, the 37.6% strikeouts. This is a little bit tough to ignore. That's a very, very high strikeout rate. That's why he's kind of a part-time player. But the power is very real for Wisdom, particularly on this side of splits. So that one goes Cards bats with a bullet. Jordan Montgomery, some shares of Cubbies bats. What is this, 5 games to go? 5:27? We could probably punch out of here at 6, I hope. A couple of these we can fly through like this one. I don't think I want to roster either of these pitchers at Coors Field. Kyle Freeland, I know I don't want to roster at Coors Field. 14% strikeouts. There's no real good reason to believe in Kyle Freeland, even with the A's in town. It's just not a good opportunity, not a good spot. JP Sears, if this game was in Oakland, I would have interest in JP Sears going up against the Rockies. At Coors Field, I think I could just leave him on the board. 6,200 on DK. He's at least priced appropriately to throw a value dart at it. The Rockies have been inept against left-handed pitching for most of the season, but it's a Coors Field game. Everything about this game is entirely created by the ballpark. There's not much talent on either side in the lineups. There's bad pitching on both sides, so it's like it's a combination of lousy pitching and the ballpark. But Sears is the gun to your head option between these two pitchers. 22% strikeout rate, 5.04 xFIP is not good, but the 4.19 ERA, he's gotten away with some bad pitching. 5.29% home runs is obviously tragic. 12.6% barrel rate is very bad. So there's not a lot of good reasons to go to him. But like I said, gun to your head type option. Very, very cheap DK value dart. If you want to do it, if you're inclined to play value pitching when nobody else does at Coors Field, that's your man. It's not a good spot though. If these teams get popular, they didn't look crazy popular given that it's a Coors Field game. I expect the Rockies will be the more popular of the two teams today, despite facing the better pitcher, just because of the numbers that I was seeing on the Athletics side. So if they are popular, I think they're easy to get away from. If they're not popular, I think they're probably worth going to in some doses, like get ahead of the field by minor degrees. I don't love the Rockies against the lefty, though. You lose the power from McMahon. It's a highly right-handed version of the lineup, but those righties are Ezekiel Tovar, Randall Grichuk, who's good but not great, CJ Cron, who's got very nice power upside but not much else, Elias Diaz, Elehuris Montero, who is a good power-hitting prospect but has not done much at the major league level, Alan Trejo, Brenton Doyle. It's a mixed bag of quality here at best for the Rockies, so I don't want to get carried away with either of these stacks. I'm just going to try and play them relative to wherever the field is. On the Athletics side, if I'm going there, it's Zach Geloff, probably some Brent Rooker, as bad as that is. 16 home runs on the season for him. He's got 7 since May 1st. Jordan Diaz, Ramon Laureano, Aledmus Diaz, JJ Bleday, Shea Langoliers, Nick Allen. It's just a bad lineup. So it's bats, bats, bats all day long in Coors Field if you're going to it. But if they're popular, I can get away from it. No real interest in either one of these pitchers. If they're unpopular, I can get to it a little bit more than the field. But even if they're unpopular, I think that it'd be unpopular for a reason. And I don't need to get carried away with it. Cue the 14-12 ball game between two terrible teams at Coors Field. I just hate these two ball clubs. I not in a actual sense. Like, I actually think that the Rockies are fun and the Athletics are a good mid-range history type of organization. I just hate these two lineups in their current configurations, especially for DFS. So just the Coors Field effect in that one. Larry says, I love the gun to your head reference. Yeah, it would be a very strange situation to find yourself in walking down the street in like Belmar, New Jersey or something like that, Larry. But hey, you never know. So I want you to be prepared just in case some lunatic comes in off the beach and accosts you and makes you decide their DFS pitcher. I want you to be prepared for that. Fanatic says you can fade this game. You won't need it. I assume that's probably referring to that Coors Field game. Yeah, I'm kind of in that spot, man. There's like I said, several implied totals that were ahead of Coors Field on both sides, and then a lot that are like competitive with the Coors Field numbers. These are from earlier in the day, but it's worth displaying that. Right, here's Coors Field. Highest overall total at 10.5 of the day, but a 5.9 run total for the Athletics, 5.52, 5.53 for the Rockies. Both two good totals, but you've got the Twins at 5.6. You've got the Braves and all their obvious upside at 5.7. You've got the Guardians and their lack of quality in that game that I was talking about, game stacking. Like, that game's got a 10-run total also. This at only a half run higher. Maybe this has gone up to 11. Maybe some of these have come down, but these are all ranking out similarly for me. A lot of 4.9s, mid 4s, 4.7 is even okay. So there's a lot of playable run spots on this board. A lot of good pitching, a lot of playable spots for runs. It's an ideal kind of a slate for just like spreading out. I think maybe you concentrate on some of the key pitchers at a variety of prices. That's kind of how I wrote it up today. Maybe shrink the pool of key pitchers at high prices. You're going to have to make some obvious sacrifices if you do it this way, and then try and spread out across a really wide range of bats and make the specific decisions about like the Coors Field spot, some of the other spots. Dane Dunning, Joe Musgrove. Dunning maybe on the board is like a lightly owned dart. We all know that he can provide successful games at 6,000, 7,400. Not projecting well by any means, in a matchup that's okay in a pitcher's park against the Padres, who are very, very top heavy, tend to underperform, have not been good overall on the season, but obviously have superstar talent in the top of the lineup. So I wouldn't get over the top with Dunning. I probably won't use it at all on FanDuel. 7,400, 15.4% strikeout rate. A 3.18 ERA is great, but a 4.71 xFIP is who this pitcher really is. 2.17% home run rate. He's pretty good at keeping the ball in the yard over time. I just greatly prefer it on the DK slate. If I'm going to do it, it would be on DK for 6,000. 74 is getting a little thin already on the FanDuel slate. Joe Musgrove, definitely some interest against the Rangers. I expect he'll be very low owned. 9,700, 9,800. Projects in that okay, that upper part of the third tier kind of a range at a 28 in the FanDuel model. So he's not like taking the top off the model, which is also probably why he'll be fairly low owned around the industry. And he is a pitcher I believe in. I think he's got more than enough talent to pitch through a Rangers lineup with no Corey Seager. 3.25 ERA, a 3.70 xFIP, 5.1 walk rate, 24.5% strikeouts over 91 and a third. It's Joe Musgrove. I don't really worry about him at the very least. So I think he's a playable part. Not a guy, maybe he's one of those guys that gets deprioritized as I try and concentrate and winnow the player pool a little bit, but I think he makes that cut for me. And given that he's at a lower price than some of those $10,000 guys, that $500-600 might buy you a key bat. So it might be worth including him and using him as a differentiation piece at low ownership, if nothing else. Bats on both sides of this one, probably pretty playable. Even without Seager, the Rangers are loaded with some pretty elite talents, given Marcus Semien, Nathaniel Lowe, Adolis Garcia. Josh Young has proven himself to be at or near that level. 20 home runs at 210 ISO, a 121 WRC plus, 50.6% hard hits for Josh Young. Ezekiel Duran's been very good. Brett Miller's a playable part, 2,400, 2,200, second and shortstop on DK, first base on FanDuel. He's more valuable at the middle infield positioning on DK, but definitely a playable piece for very cheap in the Rangers lineup. Mitch Garver, Leody Taveras, both playable parts. Garver's got catcher power. Taveras has been performing all year, 12% better than average creating runs from the 9 spot in the bottom of the lineup. Greg Biancone says Roth just gave the all clear for Pittsburgh. That's huge. I love that. Yeah, Elijah, like Larry said there, I don't think Chirinos is going to book enough innings to be truly valuable, and the strikeout rate isn't great. I just don't know fully what to expect in his first outing for Atlanta, just because he's one of those hybrid guys. He hasn't really started, he's only started a handful of games this season. Who the hell are they playing? The Brewers? Yes. Way to go, Goldfish memory. So just going back to that real quick, since Elijah asked, 11.8% strikeouts in 62 and 2/3, only 4 of those being starts, giving up a decent amount of premium contact. Even going up against the Brewers, I just don't love the spot. If I had a more reliable idea of what kind of depth, like if they said, hey, no matter how he pitches, Yonny Chirinos is getting 6 innings tonight, then that might be worth throwing a few darts at. But I could see a 5 inning. I could see a 4 inning even. I just don't know exactly how short the leash is going to be, and he hasn't been pitching well all season. Last year, 20% strikeouts. That was only 7 inning sample. He's got more experience in the show than this. Where is it? There it is. Hiding all the way back in 2019. Man, he hasn't pitched much lately. 133 innings and 133 and a third innings in 2019, 18 starts, 21.5% strikeouts, 4.44 FIP. If you could tell me I was getting that guy, I might be a little bit interested in a couple dart throws, but that's the highest level he would get to, and I don't see that guy showing up today. So that is the Yonny Chirinos recap. Yeah, Elijah, I saw that he's going to be making, in their minds a traditional start. I just don't know if that means he's got upside to 7 innings or he's got 5 innings in his arm, and that's all we're looking at him here. Price-based, it could, but I think there's also just, similar guys. 6,600 is not exactly a super discount on DK. 63, I wouldn't play him at all on FanDuel. But to spoil the end of the show, I prefer Grayson Rodriguez against my Yankees for 63. I probably prefer Brady Singer against the Twins for 64. I probably prefer Dane Dunning for 6 against the Padres. I probably prefer Cutter Crawford for 65 against the Giants. I certainly prefer Mackenzie Gore against the Mets for 73. I just think there's a lot of similarly priced guys that you don't need to go to that very questionable Yonny Chirinos play. But hey, I mean, if you like it, if you've got a good reason to go to it and you're sold on it, don't let me talk you out of it. Go out there and make a slate winning play, man. Because I mean, that is what those kind of plays do buy you, is slate winning potential, like you said, with the ability to access different combinations of bats. That's why we go to these cheap pitchers like Dane Dunning. Not in good spots, with very low confidence, with very low expectations for success, because it only needs to really succeed once a season to pay off value for you. So let's see. We talked Musgrove, we talked Dunning. Very low end darts for Dunning. He's on that Yonny Chirinos train, but a little bit more realistic, I think. Bats. So yeah, Semien, Lowe, Garcia, and Young as the priority bats, but then great bolt-ons in that Rangers lineup. Jankowski's a capable guy, good hit tool, decent speed up at the top of the lineup if that's where he's hitting. Depends on what version of the lineup comes out, but the Rangers are very playable. And then the Padres side, which is where I think we left off, 14 homers, 19 steals for Ha-Seong Kim. Career year already for him, 2/3 of the way through the season. Having a very nice season. Love him in the leadoff role. Triple position eligible on FanDuel for 3,200. 4,000 on DK. Playable part ahead of the team stars. Tatis, Soto, Machado, all outrageously good hitters. All very much have been up and down a little bit this season, but have at worst rounded into form. 20 home runs on the season for Machado, ties with Soto for the team lead. 152 WRC plus for Soto is fantastic. Leads the team by a wide margin and is just a dominant, excellent player. As I've said a number of times, when it purely comes to the hit tool, the power, and things like that, we take the speed out of the equation. I prefer Soto to Tatis. That's hard to say. I prefer that hitter when it just comes to the bat. But when you add Tatis' speed into the equation, obviously he gains ground fantasy-wise. 128 WRC plus for him, 6,100, 4,200 more expensive between the two also in the outfield, but totally worth going to him. Xander Bogaerts, 4,400, 3,000, very cheap for Xander Bogaerts, and has kind of climbed out of his hole a little bit recently, starting to hit a little bit better. I think he's on the upswing, so I want to get to shares of him. But then the last four spots in the lineup kind of die on the vine. Cronenworth's been lousy this season. Luis Camposano, Alfonso Rivas, Trent Grisham, all kind of low end toward the bottom there. So really, if you're going to pods, and I think you can against Dane Dunning for sure, it's really the top five, which is no surprise to anybody. So this one was Joe Musgrove, Padres bats, Rangers bats, Dane Dunning value darts. Very limited Dane Dunning value darts. Don't get carried away with that. The last time we talked about it, though, I think he had a pretty good game if memory serves. Do we have any new lineups here? Let's see. Any late lineups? We do have the D-bags. They are... Here we go. Diamondbacks in interesting form. Dominic Canzone hitting fifth. That's an interesting spot. 2,100, 2,200. He's got a home run on the season. Had that one big game. Very, very cheap in the outfield with what is expected to be a pretty productive bat. Kind of like that spot. He's mixing in with the bats that I already liked in Corbin Carroll, Christian Walker, Lourdes Gurriel, Emmanuel Rivera in the heart of that lineup. And then you've got very effective players at the top of that lineup in Geraldo Perdomo, who's been getting on base at a really, really strong clip, creating runs, and only costs 4,100, 2,900, and provides really good correlated scoring with Ketel Marte, who in turn, if he doesn't drive in Geraldo Perdomo, is probably himself providing great correlated scoring with the power core through the lineup here. So I really like this Diamondbacks lineup. What I don't like about it is they're facing Logan Gilbert, a pitcher that A, I have a healthy respect for, B, doesn't get himself into any trouble with a very low walk rate, a very low whip, and C, kind of want to use for DFS purposes today. So I don't know how much I get to the Diamondbacks, but I do like this lineup. I love all the low strikeout rates. We talk about that a lot with this team. 18.4% strikeout rate for Christian Walker with all his power. Corbin Carroll, 20.5% is good. 16.1 for Marte. 15.2 for Perdomo up top. Lourdes Gurriel with all his power. 16.5%. Just a really low strikeout bunch. So a challenge for Gilbert to get through for sure, but I think he's got the talent to do it. 24.4% strikeout rate is pretty good. 3.37 home run rate is a little higher than I'd like, but overall pitching very well. 3.88 ERA, a 3.73 xFIP. Just a good pitcher, pitching to form. Few too many barrels, a little bit too much exit velocity, few too many home runs. Not even a bad home run rate. Like this is just a few too many home runs. 2 or 3 extra home runs beyond what I would want or expect from him. On the other side, Tommy Henry has a matching 3.37% home run rate and a very low 31.5% hard hit rate, but he's pushing way more power to the other side of the lineup. He was filthy for home runs in a smaller sample across 9 starts last year. 4.88% home run rate, 9% barrels, 90 miles an hour of exit velo. Some of that is still trickling through the model, and it combines with just all the power hitting potential of some of these Mariners. I don't really want to go to Tommy Henry here, even at value pricing, just given that even if he does take the home run mix out of the equation, it's not like he's been stellar at limiting home runs. He's just been better, and he's been stellar at limiting hard hits, but he's still only striking out 16.3%, still giving up a 5.49 xFIP underneath his pretty good 4.01 ERA, only a 25% CSW, despite a pretty good 10.5% swinging strike rate. So I just don't think he's a very high-end pitcher. At 84 on FanDuel, he's easy to skip. 6,700 on the DK slate. You can certainly throw a few value darts at all those strikeouts in that Mariners lineup. Not like he's overly effective at finding strikeouts, but we've seen some success with pitchers who aren't adept at finding strikeouts find them against the Mariners. So if he makes 6 innings, he's probably giving you a decent strikeout total. At the DK price, maybe a few darts on it as an SP2, but not one I want to get carried away with. Like it only like maybe that much more given the strikeout upside than the Joni Torino's play. So Gilbert definitely. No real interest in Henry on the FanDuel slate, but maybe a couple darts on DK. And then definitely I want to get to some Mariners lineup just based on all the power I'm seeing here. Yeah, they might go and fill your lineup with zeros based on strikeouts, but there's a lot of home run potential in this lineup. Julio Rodriguez up to 17 homers, 23 steals, a 109 WRC plus, 14 homers for Suarez, 16 for Teoscar, 7 in only 127 plate appearances for Tommy Murphy. If he's in the middle of the lineup, major power bat when he connects, the ball travels. He hits the ball very, very hard. Only 7 homers in 423 opportunities for Ty France, but then we bounce back up with 14 on the board and 328 for Cal Raleigh. There's just a lot of premium power bats in that lineup. Lots and lots of strikeouts, but lots of power. And then Dylan Moore and Jose Caballero, kind of productive guys from the bottom of the lineup, mix and match type pieces, but capable enough bolt-on parts. Triple position from both of them on FanDuel. Dual position eligibility for Dylan Moore on DK for only 2,200. Capable enough bats. The focus is, I left JP Crawford out of that, decent on base and correlated scoring play. The focus is like here, and then all these guys are more like bolt-on parts. Ty France last year was good with the hit tool, decent with power, but this year the hit tool's kind of abandoned him. Only 245, 319, 363, 97 WRC plus. He's playable at first base for 3,029, but I think if I'm playing this team, I'd rather go with like some of these guys and then maybe get my first baseman as a premium first baseman from another team, or like maybe I combine them with, I don't know, the Yankees, and I'm getting Anthony Rizzo at first because he's cheap, or maybe I'm combining them with the Cardinals and I'm getting Paul Goldschmidt at first base because he's fantastic and pricey, and these guys are at good values. So I think the Mariners are cheap. I think they combine well. I think with the power that they're showing in the home run model, they're worth going to at these cheap prices. So Diamondbacks are definitely on the board. I think I'm going... let's see how I wrote it. Did I put Gilbert on top? I did. I went Gilbert on top, Mariners bats, Diamondbacks bats, and then I left Tommy Henry here off the list intentionally because I don't really see it. I don't really want to recommend it, but he is in that like pile of darts as you're throwing darts at the board. You stick your hand into it without looking while you're drinking beers. You might hit the front end of the dart and prick your finger, or maybe you hit a bullseye, to extend that clunky analogy. 2 games to go. I think I can. 547. We're going to get there. Cincinnati Reds, Los Angeles Dodgers. I referred to this one a little bit earlier in the show. I think that the Reds are kind of playable here, and I'm hoping that they sneak through because they're all at fair prices. There's a lot of value in that lineup. There's a lot of players that I like to get to. Bobby Miller's been good, but not amazing, not like blow him away, ridiculous, can't get to him kind of good. 2.19% home runs is very good. 7.7% barrels is okay. 40% hard hits is a little high. 89.1 miles an hour of exit velo. Joker's enthusiastic about the Reds here. 4.0 xFIP for him on the season. A 4.28 ERA. 23.2% strikeout rate. He's been pitching effectively. I think he's worth going to shares of at 7,700 on the DK slate. 8,700 on the FanDuel slate. Might even gain a share or two, but it won't be a priority spot for me. But I do think that the Reds are playable back against them on the other side. They're only drawing like a 3.8 something implied total in Vegas. I see a little bit more potential here for them. A lot of like good upper mid-range home run marks in the home run model. We get Ellie in the leadoff role. He's back to 6,100 on DK, 3,700 on FanDuel, though makes him even more playable. 6 homers, 17 stolen bases, only a 94 WRC plus. Only a 178 ISO, striking out 32.6% of the time. There are definite flaws, but he's got superstar potential. Basically, whenever he connects with the ball, he's going to do something special on the field. So you got to roster Ellie if you're going to Red stacks. I think he's capable as a one-off. Even for the cheap price on the FanDuel slate as a one-off, you could do that here. TJ Friedel's been very good. Cheap pricing between Ellie and Matt McClain. 4,300, 3,400. Makes it a playable little 3-man off the top of the lineup with a lot of power and speed upside in all 3 players. Friedel's got 7 homers, 16 stolen bases, and 327 opportunities, a 109 WRC plus. McClain has been like their best player since his call-up. 301, 370, 516, 215 ISO, 10 homers, 8 stolen bases, and 284 plate appearances. Yes, please. Sign me up. 5,900 to 4,000. He's pricey. Shortstop and second base eligible. But the positional flex that you get between him and Ellie is nice. You can mix and match those guys around positions and get to a lot of combinations of other teams without occupying like first base, without occupying the outfield. Maybe you don't occupy third base with either one of them, depending on where you're building. So it's a really effective combination of hitters. Jake Fraley, 4,900, 3,300, 14 homers, 17 steals, a 115 WRC plus. I mentioned his low hard hit rate the other day because 14 homers on a 31.3% hard hit rate is a little bit surprising in terms of output, but he gets it done, and he's been that player over the sample that we've had him for. Jonathan India, 14 homers, 12 steals, down to a 98 WRC plus, but their best player over the last couple of years. Good for counting stats, cheap second baseman. Like India quite a bit here. Votto, excellent power upside at the plate. Doesn't do a lot else these days, but excellent power upside, run creation ability. Spencer Steer having a great year, third base and outfield eligible on DK, outfield and first base on FanDuel. Cheap pricing across the board. 274, 360, 455, creating runs 16% better than an average. Has 14 home runs this year. Good output from Spencer Steer. Will Benson at the bottom of the lineup, creating runs 39% better than an average, over 174 kind of unheralded plate appearances down here. 7 home runs, 10 stolen bases. He's been productive. He's been not equally, or actually no, he's been similarly productive, more productive arguably than Ellie in a similar sample. 187 plate appearances versus 174, inarguably for run creation, 39% better than average versus 6% worse than average. More home runs, fewer stolen bases, better batting average, way better on base percentage, better slugging, lower strikeout rate, better walk rate. Small samples on both sides. Ellie's gonna be the better player over time, but Benson's not a guy to skip hitting ninth. I like that spot quite a bit. 3,300, 2,900, productive guy down there. Dodgers side of things, buried the lead. The Dodgers are carrying the highest implied total on the slate. They've got massive potential going up against Brandon Williamson here. 5,800, 6,700 for Williamson across sites. No confirmed lineup for the Dodgers yet, but probably going to take basically this form or similar to their everyday form. But they do have a couple new parts in the lineup with Enrique Hernandez and Ahmed Rosario joining the team. So we'll see how the lineup falls. I kind of like it in this configuration. I think it makes a ton of sense to pop Ahmed Rosario down here in the lineup, take the pressure off. Don't hit him second like it was in Cleveland. Like, let him find his form at the bottom of the lineup here, and maybe he starts providing some of the expected stats. 265, 306, 369, 14% worse than average creating runs for him so far. But once upon a time was a highly, highly regarded prospect, one of the better prospects in all of baseball, and has delivered, moderate production in counting stats the last couple of years. 11 homers and 18 steals in 670 plate appearances last year, 103 WRC plus. The year before, 11 and 13 with a 99 WRC plus. Like, never became a star, certainly, but those are productive enough years from a player who's always cheap, rarely overly popular. So I like the idea of just take him down here, put him down here, let all the stars and all the guys who are normally at the top of the lineup occupy the top of the lineup, take the pressure off Rosario, and let's see what we do down at the bottom of the lineup. Interesting part if he's hitting down there. Enrique Hernandez is more a mix-in type part. Depends on where they hit him in the batting order. He's playable in his return to Los Angeles, second base and shortstop on DK, second short and outfield on FanDuel. He's a career utility guy. He's a career, mix-in type of a player. He's had more capable seasons than this year, certainly in his career. 62 WRC plus this year in 327 plate appearances got him traded out of Boston. But not a priority in this lineup. James Outman at the bottom of the lineup or wherever he hits, definitely some lefty pop that you can prioritize, but the lefty not ideal. Max Muncy is the lefty I'd rather have between those two. 25 home runs on the season for Max, an 11.49 in the home run model. And then working our way up the lineup, all these guys are kind of obvious. Chris Taylor rakes against lefties, has 12 home runs in 217 plate appearances this year. JD Martinez just mashes against everybody. 55.3% hard hit rate, 17.8% barrels, 25 home runs this season, a 307 ISO. Will Smith is a star. Freddie Freeman's a star. Mookie Betts is a star. Will Smith's not a catcher, not a pitcher for 5,500 on the FanDuel slate. I forgot to change it. Dodgers top to bottom, basically whatever form of this lineup comes out. If you get Hayward in here, you can play Hayward. If you get, it depends on who comes in. I wouldn't expect Hayward against the lefty, but who knows? I would expect probably this version of the lineup, though, which I like quite a bit. So definite yes to some Reds bats. Definite strong yes to Dodgers bats. Dodgers at the top of the board. Reds next. Then for me, Bobby Miller. But I think other sites and other takes have Bobby Miller well above the Reds bats, and that is kind of how Vegas is seeing this one. Reds, when I wrote the article, were the biggest underdog on the board and a 3.84 implied team total versus the 5.78 on the other side for the Dodgers. And we talked about how there are a lot of upper fours, lower fives type of run totals on the board today. So it's taken a swing with the Reds, but it's a team I want to take a swing with. You definitely don't have to come along for the ride on that one, though. So Dodgers definitely want to be a part of. They'll be super popular, by the way, and they're expensive. They're difficult to get to, but I think there's enough to mix and match them with 28 teams to choose from that there's no reason to avoid them for popularity. They're in that good a spot. No interest in Williamson. Limited interest in Bobby Miller. Last game of the day. We made it, gang. Dodgers. I forgot to mention that, Steven. That makes a lot of sense. Dodgers added Lance Lynn and Joe Kelly. That's definite good note there. And obviously, the Dodgers are in go for it, win now type mode. That'll be interesting to see what they do with a guy like with Bobby Miller. And I think that's like indicative of what they think of him right now. They think he's going to be like a decent third, fourth starter going forward. He's not the premium apex prospect, but he's a good pitching prospect. But I think that they're going out and acquiring high-end starting pitching speaks to they probably don't want Bobby Miller pitching in a key playoff game for them, right? So that kind of shows where he is right now. I think he's a talented kid with room to grow, but they kind of have him in that type of a range right now. So I think that's believable upside for the Reds, and maybe I'll let the field have their shares of Bobby Miller. Yep, Steven, a.k.a. Kike Hernandez. I always try and say Enrique, most particularly when I'm writing, because if it's the first time somebody's reading that column and I can't put an accent on that E when I'm writing, it's an ethnic slur. So I don't love that nickname for Enrique. But I try and use his full name just to avoid any kind of confusion out there in the world. But yeah, that is his nickname. That's how he's listed on most sites as Kike. Last game of the day, Red Sox, Cutter Crawford on the bump, going up against the Giants and Logan Webb. Webb's pricey, but playable. Projects out in that like mid-range, third-tier type of option, but a very, very competent, very good Major League pitcher. 3.48 ERA, an excellent 2.95 xFIP. Doesn't get himself in any trouble with a 4.5% walk rate, 25.4% strikeout rate. Very good pitcher, and he's good at limiting power. He's good at taking away what the Red Sox bats do well. 2.99% home run rate this year on 3.1 degrees of average launch. Last year, that was much better at 1.40%, 5.5% barrels, 3.1 degree launch. So the launch angle was tied, but it was more effective last year. The year before, negative 0.5 degree average launch, 5.6% barrels, 1.51% home runs. He's given up a little bit in terms of more home runs this season, but not tragically so, and it's Logan Webb. So I have total faith in him. I just don't know how many times I get to him at these prices when that compares favorably to the pricing for guys like Zach Wheeler, guys like Max Scherzer, or whoever else on this board. So a playable part, kind of threatened a little bit by the Red Sox productive lineup, for sure. A lot of good run creation marks in that lineup, decent amount of pop in that lineup. But if he's going to take away their home run upside, which he does through the home run model, as you can see, I think that he's at least playable and maybe a good rotational piece for like, all right, I'm going to get away from some shares of popular pitcher X. I can spend that same salary on Logan Webb, use those same value teams or whatever, and just differentiate the lineup by virtue of which pitcher I go to. And yeah, Steven, it's a good call too. Not an overly hitter friendly ballpark here. So you can go to the Sox a little bit. Jarren Duran, Justin Turner, Masataka Yoshida. There's certainly plenty of hit tool, plenty of on base skill to overcome the Logan Webb. Even if they don't hit a home run, they could just rack up runs with sequencing and with their ability to connect and just drive the ball within the confines of the ballpark. So I don't want to take the Red Sox off the board by any means. Plenty of run creation, but it does limit like the upside for like a Tristan Casas. It does limit a little bit like the upside for Rafi Devers, given that he's just selling out for power a little bit more this season than he has in years past. But I love the hit tools on these three guys. Then you get like Duvall, Devers, and Casas with, even against Logan Webb, even in this ballpark, any one of those guys could hit a home run tonight, certainly. Alex Verdugo with an excellent hit tool, good nose for getting on base in the heart of the lineup. And then Connor Wong and Yu Chang, playable parts up there. On the Giants side, it's like a mixed bag of options. They're a team without a star, but they've got a lot of good players. They've got a decent amount of left-handed power with Lamont Wade, Jock Peterson, Michael Conforto, and Mike Yastrzemski in that lineup. So I like getting to some shares of the Giants, some shares of the lefties. You're throwing those lefties at a 4.15% home run rate and 9.5% barrels allowed by Cutter Crawford this year. But again, they're in the same ballpark situation, so it's not like they're in a premium hitting spot. He's got a 23.9% strikeout rate, only walks 5.9%, 4.04 ERA, 4.22 xFIP. The really only problems for Crawford have been the barrels and the home runs this year. Other than that, he's been an effective average to slightly better than average type pitcher. You can roster some darts, like I said before. I think he's a more viable dart than Johnny Chirinos, 6,500, 7,200. There's some potential there. There's some upside there. Going up against a Giants lineup that has flaws, has some swing and miss in some of those key power hitters. I don't hate the spot as a value dart. I don't know how much I would use it at 7,200 on FanDuel. It's viable, but just barely so. As a $6,500 SP2, I think he's got a lot more potential, a lot more ceiling on the DK slate. You can definitely take shares of Giants bats, though. Cheap pricing, all those lefties, plus J.D. Davis. Luis Matos, Patrick Bailey, Brett Wisely, you kind of take or leave. Matos has a decent hit tool and some speed. But then Marco Luciano, who we talked about, 2,500, 2,400 at shortstop, some premium power upside from him down in the bottom of the lineup. So the Giants are moderately playable. They don't rank out great. Actually, I'll say they don't rank out well at all. They were the 27th out of 28 ranked teams by projection. Not great on the value markings, just given the low overall projection, since it's a point per dollar value marking, but very low priced in the actual sense. And they are 8th ranked for home run upside. So there's a little bit of home run potential here. It's mostly around those lefties, mostly around these guys that you can see at the top of the lineup with some of the better approaching the magic number type of home run marks. So nobody great for power in this one. Logan Webb, probably my favorite part of it. It's probably Logan Webb, Red Sox bats, Giants bats very close to one another, and then maybe Cutter Crawford darts. That's about it. All right, gang, that's it. That's top to bottom. That's 14 games inside and out. That takes us up to 601. We'll take a quick look at the pitching slate one more time just to run through it. But I got to get out of here. I got to get some lineups built. Everything's going to run slow today because there's so many teams. That's always why the optimizers run slow. So got to get my act together over here. Max Scherzer tops my pitching slate, but this is all very, very close. All the dark green guys are potentially the same. They're all A+, top of the rotation type starters. So any of Scherzer, McClanahan, Garrett Cole, Sonny Gray, Zach Wheeler, Kevin Gausman, any one of those guys, I would have absolutely no argument if that was the top of your pitching board today. If you were saying, hey, I'm going only to this guy out of that group of expensive pitchers, and then I'm going to make my scene with some of the cheaper pitchers around it. No issues with that. I would want to spread out a bunch of shares across these guys. If you said, I'm just going to limit my pitching pool to only these guys, because I think one of those guys is so likely to be the highest end pitcher of the day, probably not a total mistake. There's other guys that I would want to work into the pitching pool just because they provide the opportunity to differentiate lineups. So this is what I was talking about when I was saying maybe you concentrate the ownership on pitcher around some of the key guys. These would be those key guys, but they're all pricey, right? So that's why I would want to leave it like a Mackenzie Gore on the board, given his cheap pricing. I would leave a Grayson Rodriguez on the board, given his cheap pricing. I'd probably leave Logan Gilbert in there, given the potential. Not a great spot. Same story with Joe Musgrove. Maybe Singer makes that list. Logan Webb probably makes that list, even though he's high priced. He'll be a point of differentiation for ownership. So I'm looking to include a couple of those parts if I went for that trim the pitching pool approach. And you're making some decisions between all of these guys. But what those guys are going to do is on FanDuel, they'll work in and give you the $7,700 Rodriguez spot. So now all of a sudden you're able to combine Braves and Cardinals, let's say, because he's so cheap, where you couldn't necessarily do that with one of the pitchers that's $3,000 more. On DK, they mix in as your cheapo SP2. So they're even more important to make sure you're including at least a handful of these cheap guys, or at least a range, a spectrum of pricing when you trim a pitching slate. Don't just trim it to these are the highest projected guys, but they're also the highest price guys. Don't just make it these guys. Make sure you're including some of those values, because otherwise you're just locked off to a very specific set of combinations in terms of what hitting you can get to. Mitch Keller in that game against the Phillies. I prefer the Phillies bat side of it, but there's realistic upside. I just don't like him at price in that matchup. 10-2, 9-6 is a little high for a guy who's been struggling for the better part of the last 2 months. Mackenzie Gore at value pricing definitely has some upside against the Mets. Gilbert, not exactly value priced. Maybe on DK is a little bit value priced. Tough spot against the low strikeout Diamondbacks. Out of all these guys, the one I have maybe the least faith in a big start is Logan Gilbert, but I would say I have a lot of faith in a serviceable start. Like, I think he puts up a good enough start. I think the occasions on which he gets lit by this team are few and far between, but I think it's a board where we're going to need a pretty damn good start rather than just an okay start. Montgomery, I like a lot at price, specifically on DK. That's a very cheap price. A lot tougher to get to at 94 on FanDuel. Grayson Rodriguez has some upside against the scuffling Yankees, although Aaron Judge is back. They're on a 100-degree humid day in Baltimore. It's not great, but there's definitely upside. It projects as the best value play on the board. Joe Musgrove, definitely some potential for a clean game, some decent innings, but not my favorite option, given that he prices in with like all these guys and ranks out down here. Singer, some potential. If he pitches like last year, he's going to have a pretty decent game at these prices. If he pitches like this year, the Twins are probably going to go off against him, and there's not much in between. So I think there's a potential for a high strikeout, good upside game from Brady Singer, but it's difficult to spot down the line, just given how bad he's been this year. Logan Webb's got potential. If he keeps the ball in the yard, keeps it down, finds a few strikeouts against the Red Sox, wouldn't surprise me to see a decent game out of him for 10-5, 10-2. It's just pricey for where he projects. Same story for Lucas Giolito. Bobby Miller, moderately on the board, more so for DK purposes at 77. And then I'm kind of like drawing the line around here with like Christian Javier as the last like high-ish end viable starter. On a different day, this 25 for 9,000 for 86 is very in play. There's a lot of days where we see like the top end of the pitching board topping out around here with only a couple options, and it looks a lot like, Logan Gilbert down. That's just not what we're dealing with today. But Javier could come out and have a great game for these prices if he finds his strikeouts. Wisniewski, not really. Dunning and Crawford, kind of viable dart throw, cheap, very, very cheap value options, and that's where I cut the board. I'm not playing Sears in Coors Field. Xavier Curry, Tukey, Freeland, Williamson. These are targets for bats down here. Judge told reporters he will be wearing a protective device and won't be 100% till after the season. Yeah, but it's on his toe. It's a protective device. What's he going to have, like a big condom over his toe? Like, all right, how much does that limit him at the plate? I think he's still going to be able to do this, step into the plate, There's a lot of pivot and there's a lot of feet in swinging and in hitting, but again, it's not something I can quantify, and it's one of the best overall hitters in the game. I will let the field get worried about Aaron Judge, and I'm going to just keep going back there until he starts hitting. Hopefully that's tonight. Rosario betting 5th for LA. Well, it's not exactly where I wanted him, but at least it's not like 1st or 2nd. So there's that. So they got him in 5th instead of Chris Taylor. All right, I'll wait to see what comes out of that. It's a very good Los Angeles lineup in a great situation. I wouldn't skip him that many times, too. He's a player I do believe in over the long term, kind of figuring it out, and he's cheap, and he plays the middle infield. So definitely a playable part hitting 5th for the Dodgers. And that is where I'm going to cut the show off, guys. Good luck out there tonight. Somebody go take something down on this crazy, huge, ridiculous slate. All I know is that something unexpected and wild is going to happen out there tonight. Well, kind of like Miles Michaelis getting thrown out in the, 2nd inning? If you're going to get hit in the back by a baseball from a major league pitcher, Miles Michaelis is on the list of guys you'd want it to come from. That was probably doing, 82 miles an hour at the time versus like a 103 mile an hour Aroldis Chapman pitch. Anyway, gang, good luck tonight. I appreciate all the thumbs up. I appreciate you guys all hanging out, all the nice things everybody says in the chat. Insult me more in the chat. Make it fun. I don't care. I love all the kind words in the chat. You guys really makes me feel good, and certainly keeps my enthusiasm high for doing all this stuff. So with that in mind, I'm clicking goodbye. Goodbye.